Everyone, thank you so much for joining yet another Missionary Spotlight. Today with me, I have Caleb and Kaitlin Westbrook, who are in Puerto Rico. They have three children, three young children. They are a young family in Puerto Rico, and they are here to share with us the why behind why they are in Puerto Rico, why they are there to spread the gospel, and that they moved their entire family there. And so it has been, we actually got to chat a few days ago just to get to know each other and to talk about what we're going to encourage others by what we're sharing today. So, and it was such an encouragement to me. So that's why I'm so excited that all of y'all are watching. And so you can know how to pray for the Westbrooks, how you can even be a part of the work that they're doing. So welcome, Caleb and Kaitlin. I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family.
All right, well, I'll start. My name is Kaitlin, and I was born and grew up in Missouri, and Caleb was also. We've known each other a long time, ever since we were 10 and 13.
Yep.
So,
sweethearts then.
well, that's another story, but we actually didn't date until we were like into college, but we've known each other and been friends for a really long time. And both our families worship together in Missouri, so we're very familiar with each other. Mm-hmm. And we have been married now for 11 years, and we've spent the last six of that in Puerto Rico. And we do have three children. Their names are Abraham, and he's 8. And Enoch is 6, and then we have a 7-month-old named Nehemiah. So
so little.
Yeah,
but he's growing fast. It goes by real quick.
Yeah, so we're really trying to enjoy those baby days right now because he does change quickly.
Yes, they do. So is he? I think we talked before. He was born in Puerto Rico, right?
Yes, he was. He is our one Puerto Rican child who has 2 last names on his paperwork.
So your children, are they bilingual yet? I mean, y'all have been there for most of their lives because you said you've been there for 6 years. So I just wondered how quickly, because kids are so much better at catching languages. But are any of your kids bilingual?
I would say our oldest is definitely in that direction and converse.
But we speak English at home.
Right. So and since we do homeschool, it's probably been a bit more limited than it would otherwise be.
But all their worship services are in Spanish. And so Abraham has, our oldest, is in the situation where like a lot of, especially second generation Hispanics are in the States, where let's say the parents migrated to the States and they speak Spanish, but then they speak English in the second and third generation. So they will like oftentimes listen and understand everything in Spanish perfectly, but respond in English or feel more comfortable expressing themselves in English. Abraham is definitely there. Like if you speak with him in Spanish, he understands pretty much 100%. But if you ask him like, hey, express yourself, communicate with us in Spanish, he's really like uncomfortable and clunky. So we're working on that, and he's doing well. And the younger one, or the middle child, I think he understands more than he lets on, but I think he's just kind of,
his interest level is a little
he's not super interested in Spanish.
I mean, he's young, so that makes sense. But so your plan, you're living in Puerto Rico, was that always the plan? Kind of what started it all for y'all to think this is what we want to do with life? So you're basically church planting, and this is not a comfortable decision. That's not something that maybe everyone thinks that they're going to do. So what kind of started it all? If you can share with us your story.
Well, for me, I was first kind of initially drawn to Spanish-speaking works when I was at Florida College in Tampa. When I was on the forensics team, speech and debate, we had the opportunity to go to South America, to Buenos Aires, and it just really hit me, like millions and millions of people. Buenos Aires had 15 million people living there at the time. This was back around like 2005, 2006. And I was just like, wow, there are so many people. And that opportunity was a real eye opener. Is the first time I had really traveled to a Spanish speaking country. And so that kind of lit a fire under me. And I started attending a Spanish speaking group at Sefner, Florida, where I didn't really like get serious about studying Spanish. I just kind of was like floating along and, just kind of helping with things. But then after Florida College, I moved to Houston, where I did my preacher training program with the Pasadena Church of Christ in Pasadena, Texas. And door knocking in that area, which I was really passionate about, I just found that there was such a need for Spanish speakers, because in some areas like South Houston, like 80% of the houses that I door knocked were Spanish speakers. And I just realized, I was like, wow, I can't even offer a Bible study, or I can't even offer to get the material because I can't even speak anything in Spanish. And so from that point, I really started like hanging around a lot more of the Spanish preachers in South Texas. I started going on trips to Mexico, to Nicaragua, and other places. And that really got my interest going. And so I hobbled along with learning Spanish, didn't really do it very dedicatedly. And until as we were dating, I was kind of like definitely decided. I was like, okay, I want to move. I want to do something with the Spanish work. And so that actually on our first date, I told her, I was like, look, I want to do Spanish speaking work. If you're not down for that, we shouldn't pursue this. So I laid down the gauntlet really early on.
I love that though. Like you weren't messing around and
yeah, maybe not the most tactful of me, but I'm not known for my tact. So
well, and that shows how special Kaitlin is.
yes.
And so Kaitlin, what was your first reaction to that?
Well, I knew it was coming, I think, pretty much. He had done a lot of his trips to other places prior to our dating. So I was kind of aware that it was a work he was becoming involved in. And, at the time I had no idea what it entailed to move. I just don't think I could have. So, it maybe sounds easier than it actually is, but I was willing to try it. At that time, we didn't have a specific place that he was looking to. So I think in some ways I expected maybe it would be a lot like more difficult or farther away. Because Puerto Rico was just not something I knew would like be on the radar. So I do think in many ways, once we narrowed in on Puerto Rico, it was maybe a definite more like middle ground, comfortable decision, because I knew it was a little bit more accessible to our family.
Right. You could still come to the States. They could come to you.
Right.
But going back to Kaitlin's kind of decision, I really have to like brag on Kaitlin, because I remember she told me when I laid down that gauntlet, I was like, look, I want to move to a Spanish speaking country. She was like, well, I don't know what that will be like, but I'm open to considering it. And, I really think for her, it was a moment of kind of like Sarah in the Old Testament, where Abraham's like, okay, we're going. And Sarah must have been like, well, where? And he's like, God will show us. And there's a lot of faith. And Kaitlin's been remarkable, and it's been a challenge obviously for her, but one thing, prior to moving and prior to getting into Spanish work, I talked to a lot of different foreign evangelists and missionaries, and one of the things that was really remarkable, and I noted a pattern, and I don't think we talk about this enough, especially with our young women and our daughters in the church, is that across the board, men who went and stayed in an area, and I'm not talking about just went and did mission for like 2 years or 3 years, but they moved and went and stayed, like the Allen family, for example, that went and moved to Brazil. By far, the determining factor usually is the wife, because most men are comfortable. They're in love with the work. They're like, yes, let's go out, let's be in the work. But it's really challenging for the wife to create a home and to create that domestic environment when everything is like topsy-turvy, when you don't know where the doctor's office is, you don't speak the language, you don't have a family network or anything like that. It's a real tax on on wives and mothers. And so it really speaks to, I think, the amazing faith, the trust that Kaitlin has in God and also in me, to be able to do this. And it's tough. It's really, really hard. I think all this by far is way harder for her than me. But I appreciate it so much. She's one in a million.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think the church needs to be made of families, and we need Christian families in leadership there, because the male and female's roles, God created them to complement each other so well. And we read of so many women serving the church, be a blessing to them. And the Lord has not promised us an easy life. In many ways, he's promised us challenges, like people will challenge you, or may have called you. When you decided to move your family, you decided on Puerto Rico. I know that was just a safer area, more ideal for y'all. I know y'all chose that, but so were you supported? This was probably, I'm sure, like your parents knowing you, going on several mission trips, just knowing you both that this is what you wanted to do. But were you supported when you finally decided, like, this is what our family is going to do?
I think the response went both ways. It just depended. Sometimes it depends on people's maybe personal thoughts or values. I think both of our families were really supportive. It was a challenging idea. I am from a family where, like, a lot of the generations have lived close together for quite some time. I grew up knowing my great grandparents and living very near them. Both sets of grandparents were local as well. And so it was definitely a shift in my family to consider that we were moving not only just states away, but across the ocean.
Yeah.
And I think it took some getting used to, like Caleb said, just knowing, where is Puerto Rico? Oh, it's part of the US. Like, we don't have to have visas or passports. We can travel to see us. They can come see us, just kind of maybe like going to Hawaii, where you have to take multiple flights.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some that maybe outside of our family realm that just had their own opinions, maybe about that. Yeah. It was a thing you should not do to move away from parents and grandparents. And it is a challenging time of life to do that, but we did have enough support, and I think it was very easy to find churches that were interested in supporting the work to send us to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, in terms of churches, the brethren, by and large, were very, very supportive and helpful. As Kaitlin mentioned, I think some of it came more from people that we knew, members of the church, but they were kind of like, that's not the best move for your family. And it depends on your perspective, right? On how you're measuring, like, what is the good for your family? For most people, I think in Texas, they looked at it as like, oh, Puerto Rico's dangerous. It's different, and I remember talking to one brother. I was at his house, and he was talking about how dangerous it was in Puerto Rico, because if you look at like the murder rates and violence rates, it is very high, in Puerto Rico. But it was funny because the news was on right at that same time. And like, this was an area where they live fairly close to like a city, but not, it was a little farther out. And they were on the news report. They were just talking about like the homicides and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh man, I wouldn't want to live in this state. And he was just like, well, that's in that like really bad part of like the downtown area. Like, you can't judge the whole state by that. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And you can't judge all of Puerto Rico just by a couple like hot places in the capital in San Juan. That kind of like distorts everything. And it is very different. Like just like judging Houston or Dallas versus, the rest of Texas, it's very different. And the same thing with San Juan. San Juan is its own thing, but the rest of Puerto Rico is a lot more tranquil, quieter, that kind of stuff. And so thankfully where we moved was also an area that was very peaceful. When we first moved, we've moved since in the last year, we moved to the north side of the island, but on the west side of the island, it was very peaceful and calm, and we never had any major issues. But I think that there was just a lot of unknown. And I think also it was surprising for people because since preaching in Texas, we spent 5 years in Texas. We loved the brethren in Texas. We loved our time in Texas. We did not follow like the normal Texas route. I mean, I didn't kind of like stair step up to larger congregations or anything like that, or I didn't stay in one area just for years and years and years. And I think for a lot of people, they just couldn't understand, like, why would you leave Texas? And I know Texans are really proud of Texas, and our two of our oldest two boys are Texan, and we love it too. But we for us there was a kind of a calling or a mission, right? Aside from just staying there. So I think that was kind of hard for people to comprehend, but overall very, very supportive.
You see a need for the gospel, for the truth to be spread, and to plant it, and to grow the work in that area. And I know it's very hard for brethren anywhere, but especially in these areas where a preacher may come and visit for a little while and then they leave, and that just kind of feels like the support system, the foundation goes with them. So, but actually bringing your family to them, supporting them, and just showing you're invested in that relationship of being brothers and sisters, I think it's so beautiful, and it's shown in God's plan for the church and how we are to spread out like that. And I know you mentioned that when you first moved to Puerto Rico, you got a hurricane or a storm right when you moved there. And, you hadn't been there before, and there wasn't as much of a strong foundation in Puerto Rico. So you really just had to trailblaze your way and find the right areas to live. And while that can seem overwhelming at first, from what you communicated, you just took it one day at a time. So tell me a little bit about Puerto Rico and the culture there. Like, are they welcoming? And how is it affected like the work that you're trying to do there?
I would say that as far as everyone we've met, Puerto Ricans are very friendly. Very welcoming. In fact, it's taken a little bit of maybe getting used to some of the terms in which they will refer, to each other. When I go to the grocery store, the cashier is speaking to me and will refer to me as the English equivalent of like my queen or my heart, like
my love,
or
my sweetie.
Yes.
Oh.
And I don't know them. Or sometimes maybe the men will call each other brother.
Yeah,
even
cousin, brother.
You don't
We're
know.
very welcoming.
Yeah, think about like the American South has like, the sweetie pie, that kind of stuff, but then like amp it up. They're very, there's a sense of like connectedness and togetherness, especially on the island, that is
right.
common.
So you can go and have a conversation with like pretty much anybody. I've spent a lot of time in doctor's offices and it's just loud with general conversation there. People don't know each other, but they're just very open to starting up a conversation really easily.
Everyone's like super, super friendly. There's a lot of family here, and because it's an island, like you see a lot of people and like over and over, and there's kind of, even though there is a lot of like transfer, especially between Puerto Rico and Florida or Puerto Rico and New York, a lot of people have like deep roots on the island and their families, they're all kind of really interconnected. So that can be a bit of a challenge coming in because we're very much like the other. And in fact, people will talk with us a lot, but it will be more like, what are you doing here? Like we clearly are, especially Kaitlin blends in a little bit better, but I stick out like a sore thumb. But no one's ever mean or unwelcoming. Everyone's been super friendly. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier about kind of setting up roots and trying to identify things, I've really always appreciated men like Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen was a huge inspiration for me because he and his family moved to Brazil and they stayed in Brazil, and his grandkids, he told me, he's like, my grandkids don't even speak English. And I was just like, whoa, like this guy's all in, like he's committed to it. And not to say that there's anything bad about moving and doing a mission for a few years. That can be very, very helpful. But if you don't have like a little bit more long-term stability, I think there's always a sense in which people are like, are you really here or not? And for us, even though the hurricane, as you mentioned, we moved in 2017 in August, and within a month, Hurricane Irma had hit the island, and then Hurricane Maria devastated the island. I mean, people were without power for months. Some people didn't have water or electricity for 6 months. It was like bombs just decimated the whole landscape. It was very, very tough. And a lot of Puerto Ricans left the island. We left for a temporary time for about a month or so because things were just really bad. But we came back, and I remember going back afterwards, and I was going to the post office, and because we got our mail at the post office, and I went to get the mail, and the post lady she was like, wait, so you're not moving? You're not leaving Puerto Rico? I was like, no, we're here. And she's like, wow, she's like, not even Puerto Ricans are going to stay. They're all leaving. I was like, yeah, well, not us. We're staying here. And we bought a house too. And that was really important decision for me, because I wanted the Puerto Ricans also understand, like, we're serious here. We're invested. And as the work goes, we're going to go with it as well. And that was, it's kind of like giving us street cred when we tell people, yeah, we've been through we've been through like, I don't know how many, three major hurricanes. We've been through the earthquakes, we've been through the sandstorms, we've been through the blackouts, we've been through all this stuff. And they're like, and you stayed. And we're like, yeah, we stayed, because we're here for the mission.
And that's part of your testimony, to say we're here to spread the gospel. We want people to be saved, right. We want to come to Christ because we care about you.
Yeah, so absolutely.
That is a huge part of your testimony, and so encouraging to us who are living more comfortably. I mean, I know what hurricanes are like. We lived in Florida for a while, but still, that is another level of commitment. And so what encourages you to continue your work when you are facing things like, obviously storms and things like that, but I know we kind of talked about the isolation before. You're separated from your family. So what are things that encourage you to continue your work?
So I think that as much as we've been through, one of the things that I feel like is we start to maybe be able to be a little bit reflective on the past and see that, things kind of tend to go like up and down, and we've made it through a lot of the downs. And so while they're still hard, I think that looking back, we can see that it's provided growth and that we've like made it. And so it sort of gives you maybe a little bit more patience and strength that, okay, hopefully, Lord willing, this is also just temporary. And we've mostly been here for the majority of the time, just our family by ourselves, moving from the States. And so I think that helped us grow a lot as a family. And we maybe started learning, it helps point you more toward God, and that if that's not where you're looking, then it's really going to pull the foundation out from under you. And, I know I've had that happen and still have a long ways to go for myself, but it shows you a lot of like what you're standing on. And so if you can shift that to more relying on God and looking to him instead of like, it was really easy to want to look and say, oh, this other family or this other thing is going to help get me through, and that's just temporary. And a lot of times it gets taken away, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think Caitlin's right. It's like ultimately your foundation has to be on God. Everything else is kind of passing, right? And a lot of times, it's discouraging sometimes to hear people talk about like, well, I left that church because it wasn't encouraging, or, oh, there was a problem and yada, yada, yada. And I think, especially in our society, we want quick fixes. We want things to be easy. And it's a lot harder to dig in and say like, nope, we will not be moved. We're going to stay. And a part of that too, in terms of having your foundation and faith in God and knowing that the hard things, like they are just passing, like this too will pass, I think another part of that is trying not to discern the signs or, and I know that sounds kind of funny, but
Read too much.
yeah, there's,
Right.
it was really interesting when we went back after Hurricane Maria, we went back to Missouri and we were there. The local reporter contacted my dad, was like, oh, I want to interview Kaitlin and Caleb because of the hurricane. And so she came, and it was interesting. One of her questions was like, what do you think God was trying to tell you with the hurricane? And I was just like, what? Like, God sent this hurricane that killed thousands of people and affected millions just to send Caleb Westbrook a message. It's like, I don't think, I mean, I know all of us want to be the center, the protagonist of our own novel, right? Like, we all have that inner dialogue and inner narrative, but like, are we really so arrogant to start discerning all these things that are happening and saying, well,
Right.
God is doing this to do this to me and this and this. And it's like, it reminds me of the book of Job. And it's just like, well,
I
it's
was
not
just
for us
thinking
to know.
that. Yeah.
So it's not for us to know. So don't worry about it. Trust in God, and keep doing the work. And so it's like, is our mission good? Yes, we are here to teach the gospel, to promote the word of God, to help save souls in Puerto Rico. That is a good and godly mission. Okay. Will God prosper us in that mission? Yes. But will Satan also attack us in that mission? Yes. So there are going to come times of great blessing and times of just terrible challenge. We don't need to be going and guessing and saying, oh, well, the challenges mean we need to go somewhere else. Because had we had that attitude, we get there, boom, like hurricanes hit us.
Time to
And
go
within
home.
the next year, there were major problems in the church. Like, it was just like, golpe after golpe is like, what is like a hit, and in Spanish. And it was just like, we could have easily stopped and said, God does not want us to be here. That's obvious, right? Because of all these signs. And I think we need to stop really trying to discern the signs, I'm speaking to myself, and just be like, okay, is our mission true? Yes. Trust in God, see it through, don't give up. And I think that's really tough because too many times when difficult times come, we are kind of flighty. And I remember when I was in Tampa, I was attending a church that was going through a division, and it was very sad, shouldn't have happened, and there was problems on both sides. But I remember calling my dad when the first signs of division were coming out, and I was like, I think I'm going to leave the church and attend another congregation. Because I mean, in Tampa, it's super easy. You just go to another church and bam, it's there. And my dad told me, he's like, no, stay there. And I was like, what? They're dividing. He's like, yeah, you need to be a good example, and you are going to learn more in that division and through that hardship than you would just go into another church. And he's right. I learned so much in that. And as Kaitlin was mentioning, throughout all of our challenges here, even though we don't really like that way of growth because it's so hard, we've grown so much because of that. We've become more hardy, more steadfast, have more perseverance because of that. But I really worry that a lot of people kind of give up and don't see it through because either they're trying to discern the signs or they're at the point of resistance. They're not
Like
convicted enough
trials.
in their mission or trusting in God enough to just like barrel through, because it always comes in waves, as Kaitlin was mentioning. There's always going to be like the calm before and after the storm. You just gotta get through the storm. In our sense, literally.
Yeah,
Twice.
it was quite literally through several storms. And James 1 really kind of became my chapter that I just clung to desperately when Brian was going through a lot of health issues. And even when I didn't understand it, because how can I count this as joy? I'm counting these trials as joy. It's because I'm seeing the faithfulness of God through all of them. And because y'all are remaining faithful in the work that you are doing, you're reaching souls in Puerto Rico. Even if you're sharing the gospel, times when you maybe you are planting the seed, but you don't see the growth immediately. So that was something I meant to ask you about. I know you and another brother were passing out pamphlets or door knocking. And so tell me about that experience.
We passed out over 100,000 invitations. It's tough too because people aren't really used to having a Bible study. So if you say, hey, let's have a Bible study, they're like, what's a Bible study? And so you really have to kind of like start from the basics and build on that. And I think that's also true in the States. I think with the States, because we're going through times of transition where now more and more people don't identify with any religion or anything like that. We can't just kind of take for granted a biblical literacy that maybe our grandparents or parents were in a world where that's the case. And that's true in Puerto Rico, definitely as well. Because Puerto Rico follows, the US in terms of culture. So
I think there's a challenge with what you were saying too about how they just aren't sure what you're asking when you ask for a Bible study. They're a little bit maybe afraid, like that we're asking them to change their allegiance to like wherever they're at or whatever church they're with. And the concept of like, we just want to have a discussion, or we just, want to study with you, and we're not asking anything from you. Like,
right.
It's okay if you don't even come to our worship service to the church. Just can we chat in your home? And I think maybe because that's also just not happening among the members of their own churches, where they're going, that they're just completely unfamiliar with Bible study outside of attending a church service.
And sadly, there's a lot of people too that take advantage. I mean, this is true in the US as well, right? A lot of people who take advantage of people. Like a couple months ago, there was this thing where they were having this big like baptism day, and they were charging people $100 a piece to get baptized in the ocean, which is crazy because the ocean's open to everybody here in Puerto Rico. You can go anywhere and get the ocean, and we
Did
baptized.
you turn over the tables or?
No, well, no, I don't have contact with those people, but we baptized tons of people in the ocean. But just the idea, like, oh, you have to pay, or like people, you have to pay money to get stuff, and so I think a lot of people are very shy about that, kind of nervous because there's been a lot of abuse, sadly, with religion. So there really is, this kind of difficult standard to move on, and just want to get back to the Bible. But people have sometimes, they're a little bit scared. But what we found is that with members, and that's kind of I've shifted my focus at least to be speaking more with members and getting studies through members. We have a sister here in Arecibo who she's very active about getting studies in her house, and she just invites people and they show up, and it's great. That is like that organic showing. And I try to impress upon them. I'm like, I will go there and be at your house and we'll have a study anytime, day or night. But you guys are the ones that need to get that. The importance of just getting people to study the Bible, it's amazing too, just how people's heart opens when they encounter the scripture. And one lady that we study with, she said, I never read the Bible because my mother always told me that if you read the Bible, you'd go blind. And I said, well, we've been reading the Bible for years and we haven't gone blind yet. So, but that's there's a lot of various assumptions and presumptions that people have that we have to kind of work at overcoming. But the brethren are our greatest allies in that, and they've
so your evangelism approach has changed because you're trying to help educate and mentor the brethren there to go out and have the studies. And I think that's something across the world, across the church, that we depend on the church leaders. When each individual is called out to go and to spread the gospel and to try to bring people in. It's okay if you don't feel just like Moses, or if you don't feel like you're the best speaker, but to bring others in. We can't put all that pressure on one family. So I know we kind of touched on this earlier. So how especially what Kaitlin was saying, but how has living and church planting in Puerto Rico affected your faith?
Well, it shows you all your problems. And it can really like tear you down before you figure out how to really start dealing with the root of different, sometimes maybe sins you have, or even sometimes just resistance to like positive changes you need to make in actually doing the Lord's work. And so I say this being in a spot still where I'm constantly having to work on that and figure out what the challenges of being a mother. And now I'm trying to teach, children as well in things that I'm still working out for myself. So
Here with you.
I think it also I guess especially because we did end up here mostly by ourselves, just really like has shown us things that we can work on as a family, whereas we might have been more tempted to look outward, even if we lived around family, to rely so much on parents or grandparents that maybe we would have still worked on things, but like at a much slower pace. So I think it was sort of the like fast track to showing us everything
As the baptism by fire
that we need to deal with. So hopefully there's, just going to be more good progress from there. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I would say that I was not prepared for like the challenges of faith or trials that were going to come. It's like in making the decision, you think, oh yeah, it's going to be tough. You got, this and this challenges that are going to come.
Bible knowledge. So
Yeah.
everything's going to work out, right?
We have good faith and stuff like that. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like the comfort zone is like, I think if you've never actually gotten out of your comfort zone, and I'm not saying you have to move to another country, right? Comfort zone might be going through a church split or going through church discipline or, going and door knocking or talking to your family member or loved one that, is not a Christian. Like if you don't get out of your comfort zone, then I don't think you really know what your faith is like. Because as Kaitlin said that, and I was like, yeah, that's absolutely right. You will be stripped down to like nothing. You will feel completely just helpless and hopeless, and you will even question if you even have a faith or not, because it'll feel totally different. It will not feel good at all. And it's one of those things, just kind of like the sign things. And I think sometimes we're too motivated or too impulsed by feelings and thinking like, oh well, I feel good, my faith is strong. And it's like, that's not right. That's definitely not right. And I know, like for me, with some of the challenges that have happened, I have been brought to tears. I have been brought to, with some of the challenges, almost feeling like I was going crazy, with depression, with anxiety, with a lot of issues that have affected me. And when I think about now, like the times that I now look back and think I felt closest to God, it was when I had completely emptied myself of my pride and I was in points of desperation because I was like, I have no one else.
Yes.
And that was it. And I think about like 1 Corinthians 3, where Paul talks about the work being tested by fire, or 1 Peter, our faith being refined by fire. Like there is definitely a lot of truth in that. And so if anyone's considering mission work, I think it is one of the best things you'd absolutely pursue. But it is going to take you through the depths of just terrible challenge, probably depression, probably like a lot of frustration, a lot of maybe marital friction and challenge and family questionings and a lot of that. I'm not gonna like try to put some Vaseline facade on it. It's rough. It's very rough. But I give thanks to God for it, because when all that other like comfort gets burned away, when you don't have anything left there, what you do have left with God, like that's real. That's really real. That's like authentic real, right? And then that when all those challenges come and that one thing you had, that faith, that connection with God is not taken away and it passes that test, that's real, and you're like, okay, that's firm. That lasts. That's always going to be there. And then when all the other blessings or challenges come, like you've got that. And that's That's amazing. Whatever mission someone is going to choose, and it doesn't have to be to move to another country or anything like that. It can be the mission of you talking to your grandparents, or your friends who are not Christians, or your coworkers, or going door knocking in your community might be your mission. Like those things are going to bring challenges that are going to push you. And if you lean into that and rely on God, your faith is going to grow, even though it might be shaken. But don't despise or look down on the shaking of it. Like lean into it, because that's what God's trying to do to teach you.
What I love about this, well, talking with y'all, it's not just about the hardships in Puerto Rico. It's kind of like what we universally are all dealing with and challenged with. So whether you're in the States or a different part of the world, we are, not to sound cliche, we're all in this together. We really are. And that's what God wants brothers and sisters to come together and to support each other. We obviously will be praying for your work, but maybe what are some of the other needs that you can see in Puerto Rico specifically?
Well, we're always in need of more workers. You know, the harvest is plenty, the laborers are few. It bears worth repeating that the U.S. has a huge Spanish-speaking population, and not just with Puerto Rico included, but like even the mainland U.S. is the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world per capita. And a lot of people don't realize that. And I think, you know, hopefully our brethren are starting to wake up to see the need of Spanish evangelism. You got like tens and millions of people who are speaking Spanish in the States, and it's not going to just go away. And I mean, obviously, Puerto Rico being a part of the U.S., there's a lot of evangelistic opportunities here as well. And so we need more workers more than anything, but obviously the prayers of people are very helpful. It's very helpful when we get letters or emails too. That's always really encouraging. And there's some brethren of the churches that that support us. They're just great in contacting us, because, you know, we don't have quite the support network maybe that other people do. And those are really great. I mean, so if someone calls us, we're never going to be upset about it. Obviously, we're going to be like very happy to hear from people in the States and just to receive encouraging messages. That's great. But if people are interested in the work, once again, it's like you don't have to commit to sign up to live here for 10 years or 5 years or anything like that. Even people who come down for a short time are always very encouraging. If someone's interested in the work, come visit. It's as Kaitlin mentioned, it's a Southwest flight or a Delta flight or whatever airline you want to fly. There's no need for passport, no need for money change or anything like that. You can come and visit. If you're interested in Spanish work and you want a safe environment with help from brethren here, and pretty easy transfer without having to mess with visas or anything like that, come on down to Puerto Rico. You got an open welcome here, and the church really would benefit a lot from it. So whether that's 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, whatever the case may be, we're very flexible. And even if people, as you mentioned, even if people came to Puerto Rico, learned a bit more Spanish, and went back to wherever it was, Kansas City, Missouri, Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, or wherever the case may be, there are Spanish opportunities in those areas, a lot of Spanish opportunities. And it really shows a lot of love and concern when you can go up to somebody, even if it's in broken Spanish, and say, you know, buenos días, ¿cómo está? ¿Quiere estudiar la Biblia conmigo? Like something as simple as that. And you're going to fail and do terrible, but the effort there shows to the person you care about their soul.
Exactly.
And that's something that I think we can all improve on, and we can all push past our comfort zone to do, because we need to understand, like, even though there may be a language barrier that, yes, has its roots in Babel, right, on Genesis 11, we understand like the Great Commission is to transcend that, right? And the Spirit brings us all into harmony, and that's what God's word's about. And so when you're putting forth that effort to learn another language, to reach out to somebody, and not that you have to move to Puerto Rico to learn Spanish, but just learning that and doing that is worth so much. And I really hope that our brethren in the States, that we all kind of get motivated to reach out on that, because especially like in Texas, we spent several years in Texas. There are so many Spanish speakers, but yet it's very easy to be an English speaker and just be like, I speak the dominant language. I'm good. I'm comfortable. I don't want to put myself through the humiliating process of learning another language. So, we just kind of conveniently forget those who are around us, but
Yeah.
we're called to higher standards on that.
Well, this has been wonderful. I think it's the challenge, the call to action that we all really need to bring us back to the root of God's word is to spread the gospel, to bring others to Christ, whether that is next door or whether that is in another country. And, you're just not learning a language to better yourself, but you're using it to spread the gospel. So thank you both so much for taking the time, and thank your kids for me sharing of you with them. I know with 5 kids of my own, it's not easy to get an hour alone, let alone maybe 5 minutes. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And we are so thankful for what you and Brian are doing with Creation Revelation. We really support what you guys are doing, and the kind of like taking that responsibility or call to action to educate your children. I mean, your guys' materials have been great as we've used them to teach our sons, and we'll continue to use them. And we really appreciate what you guys are doing, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys. And if anyone is interested in more Spanish work, there are a whole lot of opportunities and resources available. But if anyone specifically is interested in the work in Puerto Rico, we have pages on Facebook, Solo Cristianos, that is solo, just like it sounds in English, and then Cristianos. That's my personal like evangelistic page where we publish a lot of studies and do other activities. And then you can search for various churches in Puerto Rico. Like there's La Iglesia de Cristo in San Sebastián or La Iglesia de Cristo in Arecibo. Those are 2 groups that we work with in the central and western parts of the island. Or if anyone has any questions, they can always contact me or Kaitlin anytime, and we'd love to be of help. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link all of those in the description of this interview. So thank you so much. May God bless your work there, bless your family, and grow your faith. I know it's grown immensely since y'all been there 6 years ago. So thank you both, and y'all have a wonderful weekend.
Amen. God bless.